Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm saying welcome and not welcome back because, well, this type of video may attract a different sort of audience than I pass to. If you're wondering why I'm not playing a silly Roblox game, it's mostly because the mic I tried to buy for cheap had to be returned for its awful quality. The only other mic I have is this little clip-on one from my dad, and I don't want to risk it falling off in the middle of a game and me being unable to fix it without losing immediately. So I'm going to attempt semi-long form essay content for a bit. This video is mostly filler and a rant to get off my chest while I work on something concerning a game dear to my heart. Going into the video, this is a very on a whim, so please excuse me if I'm a little all over the place. No joke, I start jumping with how mad some of these things make me. Spoilers ahead, and quick disclaimer, I have not watched the show in its entirety. Most of my opinion is built off clips and information my dad gave me, and shout out to my dad, by the way, for letting me read his whole Game of Thrones series and introducing me to this. I also want to say that the actors did what they could with the items they were given. When I say anything toward a character, please separate that from the actor. I plan on getting to appearances, and I don't want my words to be twisted into anything mean spirited. And with that out of the way, let's just get into it. Beginning with a quick recap of the books, a lot happened. So much that if I tried describing it all now, you'd probably fall asleep. But I'll try. Basically, big political turmoil occurred when the current king at the time succumbed to a suspicious war wounds and left the kingdom with a possibly illegitimate heir. Now there are multiple claims to the Iron Throne, opponents across the sea, and several people with their own agendas and problems. It's a lot. Each book was like 500 plus pages and left you hungrier than the last for the progressing plot. It is satisfying to watch things end or get resolved or even made worse when reading Game of Thrones. The reader is not spoon fed anything. It's up to you and you alone to keep things in mind when reading and figure out what happened or somehow how someone's plot concluded. So imagine my surprise, my horror, my sadness when A Dance with Dragons, or Dance of Dragons, I forgot the title, ended on several cliffhangers, one of those being Jon Snow getting Julius Caesar. In the book, there wasn't there wasn't one after that. 5 books in, you're deep into the series. There wasn't one after it. I was like, are you serious? And I did not cry because, well, no character is immortal in a Game of Thrones. No character is immortal in a Game of Thrones, you know? No matter how much you care, the pages are inked and set in stone. You can't prevent any death. And I was fine with that. So when my dad begins to tell me there was a show that went off the rails from the books and plummeted into the chasm of awfulness, I had war flashbacks. Let me tell you of another book series that had the honor of me reading it twice. If you must know, I am a person who does not reread books unless I really, really like them. It's more of a habit thing. I find that the book becomes less interesting if I just know what's going to happen. So when I reread Artemis Fowl, it was for a good reason. Anyway, so that book series, like I just accidentally said, is Artemis Fowl. This book had a chokehold on me throughout my middle school years. It was fantastical, intriguing, and all in all well written. I loved every character, I loved the stakes presented, and I loved Artemis Fowl most of all. He's just that cool, okay? So when a movie was announced, I was excited. At, at first, the trailer made me want to scream. It is a key moment and is one of the reasons I am a book better than movie girly, okay? They race swapped several characters. They race swapped what's his name? Butler? The bodyguard? I forget. I think his name was like Butler. They race swapped his little sister too. They race swapped Holly. They gender swapped Captain Root. And then they just ignored several of the books in favor of having a fairy Armageddon. That didn't happen until the 8th book, if I'm even remembering right. I hate it when producers look at a book series and stupidly think they can press pages upon pages into like an hour and 40 minutes. Are you being for real? So my dad told me there was a show that took a dip. I cringed physically Without the framework of any books, shows are bound to fail because they have no understanding of the characters on a fundamental level. And so I looked into it a bit further, found some clips to watch, looked at how the show imagined each character, and found things to love and to hate. Let's start with the good, because negativity is tiring. And even though I quite literally went to bed last night ranting in my head how mad some stuff made me feel, I did have some compliments for the show. They did wonderful work in the first season that follow the books visually. With a lot of fantasy slash medieval settings, producers make the mistake of making things way too clean. But Game of Thrones, especially the books, are not clean, like at all. It's sometimes gross if you think too hard. But just don't mention all the pee and the poo and the other disgusting stuff that occurs, like Tywin's death. The show looks gritty, the outfits are on point, and a good chunk of the characters, I say a good chunk, are perfectly cast. Like the fact that I hated Joffrey in the show just as much as I did in the book. I'm so glad he died. And that he actually looked related to his mother was just mwah. I'll get more in I'll get to more of my opinions on the character designs as well. There was also the humor. The books themselves aren't funny until you get to like a Tyrion or Jamie chapter, but in the show I found myself smiling here and there. And the acting is on point. Yes, I liked it. They brought each character life, especially Daenerys. When I was reading the book, she came to mind, and when I was recapping the show, she still came to mind. Perfect casting. The one scene that I really did enjoy from the later seasons was the one where the Starks, minus Jon, confront Littlefinger and kill the guy. It was so satisfying. Though Sansa's little speech toward the end got all, "We use the power of family to beat you." It was still perfect though. And Melisandre, loved her casting. She was fire, literally. And the dragon CGI looks very cool. I'll give them that. But now that I've said my piece about what the show got right, oh boy, I gotta get into the rant. I'm itching for it. You don't understand. Right, so this is the part where it gets a little messy because I did not want to write it out. Quite literally, the good stuff already has like 3 pages, and if I got to every single bullet point, there would be 10, 20. Like, I quite literally can't shut up about it. So let's get into it. I should disclose that a lot of the stuff I saw was just for the latest seasons. So I didn't really know earlier seasons, but I'm just, how do I put this? I'm just going to go off the fact that they mostly stayed with the books, even though they did discard some very interesting plot lines that they could have used, you know? Um So, from this moment forward, if you agree with anything I say, if you disagree, or if you just want to correct me here and there, feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to respond if I can. I love discussion. I love hearing different opinions. I think opinions are cool, and that everyone who has them is also cool. You know? All right. So let's just get into it. So my first point says the Starks, and what I mean by this is a lot, actually. So, how do I put this? I think, me personally, I have a bit of beef with the Stark look because I was like, okay, do they look like a family? And I'm looking up all the actors, and no, they don't. I mean, like, they all have like the same nose bridges. I was trying to see a similarity in their eyebrows or something like that, but on a closer look, it's like y'all don't really look alike. Like, just how do I put it? You take their heads, you look at the shapes of their heads, and usually in families there is like a dominant head shape or maybe a merged head shape that appears. But I wasn't seeing that. Arya, like, no offense, her head was just shaped completely differently from her family. Like, I guess John, Rob, and what's his name now? Ned, they all share like a similar head shape, but that was just because they're guys, white guys. Sorry. Um, And Bran and Sansa shared a similar nose bridge, I guess. I looked at it. But apart from that, I was just like, Arya just she looks like she's the bastard child instead of Jon Snow. You know what I mean? Um, so I was like, that's weird. Yeah, like why do they look like that? I can't blame them because the acting is still amazing. Like Sansa's actor, I was like, okay, you go, girl. We love a girl, a queen. Um, I don't know. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, that made me a bit mad. And then there was also the problem of ages. Yeah. I'll get to that in a second. But let me move on to the second bullet point. These are also way out of order. So please don't think I'm talking like plot lies because I don't have the brain power to put these in order. Let's talk a bit about Jon Snow, right? Okay, I loved Jon Snow in the books. He was very smart, very determined. His character went through several arcs. There was an arc where he had to spend time with the wildlings, and he found himself deviating from the new way of life that he found with the Night Watch. Um, he was finally living for the first time in forever. He could leave behind the halls of Winterfell where he never really felt welcome by Caitlyn and his other siblings, except like Arya and Robb, maybe. And he could finally find peace and solace with Ygritte. By the way, Ygritte's death, I was just like, whoa. I, it made me sad. I didn't cry though. I couldn't bring myself to cry for any of the Games of Thrones characters in the books because, well, I was like, well, they're mortal. They can't live forever. Um, but yeah, so he comes back from the wall. He's dealing with issues. Everyone thinks he's a turncoat, but when he tries to explain himself, they're like, "Okay, John, okay, we believe you, kind of." And he manages to become Lord Commander. Now, when that happened, I kept it in mind that John is still technically he's like 18 or under, somewhere there. I can't remember the exact ages that characters were when they started out the books, but I know Sansa was like 13. And by now, maybe like a year or three has passed. So he's probably like 18, young adult. I don't know. He's still beardless, is what I'm saying. They literally called him like the boy commander because he's just that young. Um, so when I saw the actor for Jon Snow having a whole Tony Stark type beard, mirrored mustache combo, I was like, oh wow, that's nice, I guess. You know? Um, but yeah. So when I found out from my dad, who's like, "Oh yeah, you were mad that Jon Snow got stabbed, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dad, it was crazy." But I'm like, "What's the wall gonna do now?" I didn't think of Jon alone because people just because Jon is Lord Commander, it doesn't put him above the men who are literally like dying in the streets every day in King's Landing, say. I knew at some point he was either going to die or have to be sent somewhere. It caught me off guard. I was like, wow. But at the same time, you also saw it coming because of Melisandre's visions in the fire. She was like, I just see a lot of daggers and death and bad stuff. And when they stabbed him, I was like, whoa, where are we going to go from here? What are they looking to achieve? At this point in the books, I was conditioned by Game of Thrones to view the whole web. You can't just get caught up in what one character is doing because that is every character's downfall. It was Cersei's downfall, it was Tywin's downfall. You being selfish in Game of Thrones in the terms of only thinking for yourself and only thinking as far as you can see basically means death. So when this happened, I was like, that was an oversight by Jon Snow. Yeah. And it was a realistic oversight. He's still young. He's not going to escape unscathed. And since he got Julius Caesar, probably stabbed multiple times, he's dead. He's cooked. Arya killed a little stable boy with one stab to the gut. John probably got several. He's dead. So back to where I was starting from, imagine my surprise when my dad tells me that Jon Snow lived through that. He lived. Are you serious? Are you serious right now? What do you mean? Because if you're still following the formula of the books, right? Those men of the night those men of the night watch would have to be punished, right? Even if Jon did live, he is not strong enough to quell the rebellion that was already spiking up. So if he didn't die that night he was getting stabbed, then he would have died somewhere along the line of trying to get his power back. Like, hello? So I don't know what he did in the show to live, or if those people who literally stabbed him were punished, or if it was like a fewer number. Because last when I was reading it, it was a good chunk. They were like the people who have been disagreeing with him for a while now. Um, so I was just I was blown away, and I remember watching this one video. I'm so sorry because I cannot remember the channel right now. I think it was like Supercut something. Anyway, this guy does like top 25, top 10 worst moments in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones videos, basically. So I was watching the one that was top 25 worst moments. And there were several scenes of Jon just surviving. And I don't mean surviving as in actually fighting for his life surviving. I mean surviving as in everything in the world cannot touch him. Um they were bent on making him the good looking main character. He has this weird backstory. He's the bastard of the Lord of Winterfell, and also like maybe half Targaryen because of his mom, and he's going to serve this new queen Daenerys, and we'll get to Daenerys. We'll get to her. Um and he's so cool, and he has his sword long claw, and he can fight off hordes of whites on his own. He can fight a whole army on his own. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That scene where he's whipping at his sword and it's shining in the light, like bright silvery iron, and he's there. He has no helmet, minimal armor. Like, I'm pretty sure he's dressed in leathers. And he's going up against enemies in horseback. On horseback. Oh my gosh. That scene made me so mad because in the books there's emphasis on a formidable enemy being on horseback, okay? A formidable enemy on horseback is your worst nightmare. Like, you just think about it realistically. And I know it's fantasy, but Game of Thrones is grounded in the way that a lot of fantasy isn't. There's a religion, there's laws, like, but there's no laws concerning magic because magic is taboo. The only mystical aspect that you can really point out is the dragon riders, like the Targaryens, and just dragons in general. But even those have been dying out. It's a very grounded fantasy, and that's what I love about it. So for Jon to defy the laws of like simple battle and take on a bunch of these people on horseback, it's not even a bunch of people, it was an army, like just lines upon lines, and it was just like, are you serious? Are you serious? Like, oh my gosh. Just like, not even someone who's experienced on riding in horseback could hold his sword at an angle, aim it towards Jon's neck, and just lob his head off. And if this was the books, he probably would have died. But because the producers, or the writers, or whoever is behind it, decided they need Jon alive, made the scene like that. And my dad, he he was like, "Oh, but the scene looks cool." And don't get me wrong, he was just saying that because yes, it does look cool. But then I countered. I was like, "Dad, it looks cool, and that's it. There's no substance, right?" If I think I would have felt better if it was a sacrifice of some sort. But because it's just another battle in a field of millions, It's just like, oh, okay, it's another thing to add to his roster. Okay, he's such a formidable fighter. Wow, he can take on people on horseback, even though he probably should have died. Like, at some point, it just becomes boring, superficial plot fodder instead of a cool feat. So, yeah, I have issues with John's plot armor. I hate it so much. But so I don't talk about like how much the show just killed Jon Snow as a character. Um, Let me move on to the third bullet point. Here I have her in character butchery. Now, what do you think I mean by this? Um, they they killed a lot of characters, and do I mean killed as in, you know, got them bloody, got their neck sliced like Littlefinger? No, no. I'm talking about butchery in the terms of ruin. Pages upon pages have been built. Each character has things in their past, in their current present times that are affecting them, how they think, how they feel. And that's just what makes George R. Martin's characters feel so alive. They feel real because they're changing, they're not stagnant, right? So tell me why I'm coming across this show and the way they are just flipping characters like it's nothing. Like if all the things that they have been doing throughout their lives is nothing, right? Like people can change, but change takes time, and change is not an instant flip of the switch just because people need it. Someone who's a pushover isn't going to suddenly become mean in one single moment because, oh, well, they need to. No, someone who's a pushover is going to need several instances before they truly become someone you don't want to mess with, right? So let me just get into it. The first character I want to bring up, I think I added this like a little bit later to my script, if you can even call it that, is Varys. Now, in the books, Varys is a force to be reckoned with. He's the master of whispers, a spider in King's Landing. He's very, very cool, right? Um, so when I was watching the video that included top 25 worst moments, I found out that apparently Varys had been urging Jon to commit treason against Daenerys because they just rushed Daenerys getting. I'll get to that later. You know what I mean? Basically, Varys was like, yeah, commit treason, bro. Go ahead and do it. And if you don't know, Varys is a very slow, calculating person. Every plan, every step he takes is positioned to either favor the party that he knows will benefit either him or someone else the most. So tell me why Varys, who has quite literally kept his head through the biggest stretch of turmoil that Westeros has ever known, is suddenly just speaking in the open, being like, yeah, betray the queen, bro. You can do it, betray the queen. Like, hello? Hello? That's not my master of webs. That's not my spider. No. Are you serious? Um, hello? So yeah, I was just like that's weird, but that's actually the least of the issues, okay? So let's move on to Arya. I'm going to be honest, Arya was my favorite character. Well, is cuz she's still alive. Um She embodies that book personality of a girl who simply cannot be tamed and refuses to be tamed because of the way she is. She's tomboyish, she wants to fight, she looks up to Jon Snow, and their relationship in the books is very cute. I loved it. Also, this is a little just off topic tangent. Like no offense to the actress cuz I she did what she could, but in the book she's referred to as Arya Horseface, so it gave me the impression that her face would be at least a little longer, you know? So when she had a different face, I was like, oh, that's not my Arya. I mean, I guess they had to do it so she could look like a boy. I don't know. I was just like, okay, well, that's weird. Weird choice, but okay. But back to the main point. Arya, she slowly became like a second Jon Snow in the terms of plot armor and maybe in character. Um, how do I put this? The scene where Arya is stabbed twice directly in the gut, then proceeds to run, roll over several fruit baskets in Bravos, and swim through water, like just go for a swim and come out alive, was it was something. I was just like, wow, how could you do something like that, you know? And how do I put this? Arya's character butchery did not come from the story itself. I think they did keep her fiery, wannabe heroine personality that she had in the books. The only place they got it wrong was how everyone else in the world realistically responded to it. The temple of the faceless god, or I forgot what they were called, like the many faced god. I forget. Wherever she was working, not working, apprenticing during her time in Bravos, they were teaching her a lot of things. And while yes, it did include physical violence, it was never with the focus of surviving or battle training, right? Obviously Arya failed her little test where she got stabbed by that woman who was really like faking her out, I guess. Um, but in the books, I must remind you that there was a scene where Arya, who was made blind by her mentor, guy, priest, dude, I forget, um, where Arya, who was made blind, had to fend off an attacker with a stick. Now, a scene like this makes you question, but when you're in the temple of the many faced god, it makes a lot more sense. There's multiple facets to everything. They took away her sight and forced her to combat something she couldn't see. She would have to learn, she would have to get hurt, but not hurt enough that she couldn't like do anything anymore. Um every moment there was a teaching moment. It meant something for her character. And I could almost feel it through every page that Arya was learning. She 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 kept saying she was known because she wanted to stay. As soon as she acknowledged that she was still Arya Stark, they would be like, well, we have to kick you out, and she doesn't want that. So by saying no one, I'm no one, she is effectively forcing them to keep her there, right? And they don't want to harm her. They do want to teach her. So for Arya to be in Bravos, to just get stabbed like that by, I don't know, someone, I don't remember. Anyway, for her to get stabbed like that, to roll around, to be bloodied and wet and just walk through the cities unnoticed, like it didn't feel right. It didn't feel Arya. Like I wasn't watching Arya Stark. I was watching some girl bleeding out walking through the streets. And it's just are you serious? Like, and the people in Bravos, they're pretty chill, they're pretty nice. I was just like, are you serious? So you're going to ignore the fact that Arya is a learner just so you can have something for shock value? Like, I don't know. Moving on. We're going to Bran. Oh boy, Bran. Bran Stark was and is a good character. I'm going to say this again. I have many praises for Game of Thrones, but I just love how real he is. You feel the loss of his ability to walk very acutely because every time he describes himself climbing. Every time he describes himself climbing, it's artful, it's tasteful, and it's beautiful. So when how do I put this? So in the books, Hodor, Mira, and Jojen and Bran all make the journey to the green people, like the old people's place under the mountain. And there Bran meets his new mentor. I think his name is like White Tree or something. I don't know. He was like bonded to a tree. He's barely alive, and he's beginning to learn stuff. Um, so imagine my surprise when I start seeing this show. And another tangent, Bran is in a wheelchair. Let that sink in. A wheelchair. Let me get this straight. So Bran broke his legs, and they're like, "Well, guess we gotta pull out the wheelchair." Are you serious? And and if wheelchairs are a thing, why am I not seeing them in the streets? There's plenty of old people who can't walk. Why does Bran have a wheelchair? Why? Like, actually, Game of Thrones is set in a place where people still die of large sicknesses because they don't quite understand what's the word now? Sanitation. Game of Thrones is a place where poisons are still undetectable efficiently because they don't have the science for that. They have wheels on wagons, right? But they how do they make a wheelchair? How? When? Like, if someone knows when he got this wheelchair, please like let me know because it's actually driving me insane. Um I don't know how to I can't. I hate his wheelchair. He was carried by Hodor in a basket, and we're just putting that down the drain so he can sit in a wheelchair and be mysterious. And don't get me started on his mysteriousness. Okay, how do I put this? Even when he was under the mountain learning new things by his new mentor, Bran still had that childishness to him. He's a young kid. He's like 10, 9, I don't know. And that childishness comes with a hopefulness that he views the world with. So tell me why Bran is just sitting there, no expression, staring out. Oh, I don't think I want anything anymore. Like, shut up! You're like 16. Stop it. Leave. Not even 16. He's like 13. Probably. I don't know. Time has passed, yes, but I'm just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Something, and no offense to the actor because the writers or the directors probably told him, okay, you have to like appear like prophetic and know it all, but don't show any emotion, okay? And the dude's like, okay, like he was doing his best because I wouldn't be as mad if Bran's actor was not Bran. You know what I mean? Like if it was a totally new character who was supposed to be like that, I would be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. He's doing a great job. But it's Bran. Bran, a little boy who with his skin changing abilities that a good chunk of the Starks have, and his sudden like knowledge, like it felt too sudden. Like what was he doing that made him so knowledgeable but also so unsympathetic and placid faced? Like, are you serious? Oh my gosh. So yeah, that just it made me mad really. Bran, he speaks so monotonely and I'm just like, this isn't, who is this? What are you doing in my house? Like, anyway, moving on. I'll try not to dwell on this because I don't want to speak on something I'm not knowledgeable about. But Tyrion. In the books, Tyrion is one of my favorite characters. He's sad. He's a mess. He's the definition of boy failure. And yet he's cracking jokes. He's getting drunk on wine. He's sleeping at the brothels. He's like, I'm a dwarf. I got nothing going for me. It's fine. Um and I was just like, wow. Like he's the definition of a complex character. I care for him, I hate him, I love him, I despise him. Like he's just everything. He feels very real. And in the show, he's brought back to Westeros. Don't ask me how, cause I don't know. I don't know. Um And because Daenerys is dead, um, how do I put this? He's helping speak for Bran so Bran can be the new king. Okay. Just from the scene alone, right? I'm going off the books here. Um, why? What does he have to gain from this? Okay. When Tyrion came with the other Lannisters and the Bury, well, not the other Lannisters, with Jaime, Cersei, and Robert to Winterfell that first in the first book, um, I don't even know if he met Bran. Like, like I don't remember, but if they did, it's like a passing word. He doesn't know the kid. Even though he was framed for trying to kill a kid, he doesn't know the kid. He doesn't know him. And now he's been through even worse. He doesn't know Bran any better. Like, if Tyrion had actually like sat down and had a conversation with Bran, he'd be like, "Wow, you suck. You're so boring." Like that's what my Tyrion would say. Okay, he'd be like, "Can I get some more wine? Cause this guy's a horrible joker." And Bran would just like, and Bran from the show would just look at him like deadpan with no expression and just be like, you have such big words for being a little man. Like, be quiet. Be quiet. So why is Tyrion standing there like blah blah blah? We need Bran to be king because his story is interesting, his backstory. If that's the case, then make Jon king. If that's the case, make Arya queen. Like, what is he doing? Like, actually, Tyrion only speaks and makes jibes when it will benefit him the most because he knows that his words are all he has and he uses them sometimes carefully and sometimes he just throws them about. But most of the time, a good majority of the time, he is using his words as his greatest advantage because he has nothing else. Why is he using his words in this situation to help a kid that he barely knows? Like last I checked, or at least in the scenes I was seeing with them, because the Starks were all together again. The Starks are in the snow. Tyrion is chilling. I don't know where was he that he got to know Bran so closely that he needs to make this guy king. And also, this is another tangent, but what is with the writers deciding that tying plot lines equals bringing characters from opposite sides of the map closer together for very forced relationships? Like, are you serious? Are you serious? What's the connection between Bran and Tyrion? Tyrion could care less. Tyrion, like, he doesn't know Bran like that. Like Bran could be like, my story. I was pushed through a window and I lost my legs. Like, get out of here. Go tell it to make a wish or something. Like, why should Tyrion care? I couldn't wrap my head around it, and that's what I just despise. That these plot lines that they're trying to tie together don't make sense. It's like you're taking two separate strings and tying them together, but the knot that you put in there is so big and awful that it's distracting me from literally anything good. But let me just continue on the character butchery route, okay? As we go on to Daenerys. Daenerys. Oh my gosh. She was another one of my favorite characters just because you know when you find yourself falling into a familiar trope of the strong heroine, right? She was that to me. But at the same time, she was just a girl, you know? And she took care to remind everyone of that. She fell for some guy she thought was hot. She married another random guy because she wanted peace for Marine, you know? She punished 163 men. She punched 163 men because they strung up children for her to see. She is still in every right a girl. And we'll get to ages later. We'll get to those soon. Um and how to put this? I get it that girls are finicky, but the way the writers, producers, directors handled it was icky. How do I put this? Again and again in the later seasons, Daenerys was making horrible choices when before she sought the counsel of those around her several times before landing on the definitive solution that she wanted. She never ever, like, she learned from her mistakes, basically. So when I was watching the video, and several, not once but several times, Daenerys was making the mistake of putting her not strong fleet on the waters and then getting jumped by the Greyjoys. Do you know how mad that made me? Like, are you serious? Did she just forget from day to day? Like, oh, wow, we just lost a whole bunch of our ships. Okay, we gotta put our ships out again. Are you serious? She's not stupid like that, and she isn't rash like that. If Daenerys was rash, and if the books had established that, then she would have already been in Westeros by a Dance with Dragons. She would have been trying to get back there and fighting and joining the fights that were already occurring because she was rash. But she wasn't. She was like, okay, well, I don't know how to rule. Let me stay here, learn how to sort things out, and then I'll go to be prepared. Daenerys is calculating. Despite her young age, she's maturing while she as she goes, and that maturity is it defines her character. So to my surprise, when I see a scene where Daenerys burns down burns down King's Landing on a whim, like she makes like a constipated face a couple times, and then she's like, okay, I gotta burn it down. I gotta burn it down. Like, goodbye. Leave. Stop. What are you doing? It made me so mad. I was just like, are you serious? Daenerys does not do stuff like that. And yes, you may say she's a little bit impulsive. There was the time in the books with A Dance with Dragons, once again, she jumped onto the back of Drogon just because she could. But I think it was more done out of desperation to control the situation. Her dragon, who'd been gone for a while, she finally saw him again and she was like, wow, yeah? So tell me why this place that Daenerys has been fighting to get to, she burns down. Just just because. Why? What are you doing? Like you can't say she's gone mad because madness stems from an emotion first. Daenerys was an infant, a child. She barely remembers the palace, the Red Keep, the town around her because she spent a good chunk of her time jumping from place to place or being in Pentos with Illyrios and then being with the Dothraki. Like, hello? Daenerys? Where did you go? Um, a good example that is very similar to this King's Landing scene is when Missandei is killed. Now, by the way, Missandei, I love her. She's a sweet girl. I was like, oh, she's so sweet. She chill, you know? And when the Missandei got her head lobbed off by, I don't know, the opponent, don't quote me, she got her head cut off. Daenerys watched it. And she was mad. That was her best friend, her confidant, someone who had wisdom beyond her years, and they just killed her. Daenerys in that moment knew that she couldn't take a lenient route, just as she couldn't with the children left on the side of the road, because it was an offense to her principles, her fundamental morals, the stuff that she stands upon. So she burns that place down because they broke her morals. They they crossed the line basically. And that was satisfying. The burning downs of King's Landing was sudden, it was done for shock value, it was superficial. Like, why? If, and I remember it, the guy in the 25 worst moments of Game of Thrones said this. He was like, if Sir Barristan hadn't been killed in season 5 and it had instead been killed by in King's Landing, it would have made a lot more sense to Daenerys just snap like that. But instead, they just have her make a face. And I was just like, are you serious? Are you serious right now? Why would you do that? Why? Why? You know, like, it doesn't make sense that this kingdom that she is about to rule, that she has been planning to take over for the longest time now, is just going to bend to her will because she burned down the equivalent of the continent's capital. You know? It's like there's nothing to achieve, nothing to incite. It's just a scene. It's just a scene. And sure, yeah, the CGI fire looks cool rolling all over those people that Daenerys was probably supposed to rule over, but it's fine. We just need the dragon to kill people. Yes. Yes. Let's just kill her character of being calculated and slightly more mature for her age and only aggressive when provoked so we can have a cool scene. Like, are you? Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's move on to specifically the false stakes. Now, I'm going to bring up Jon Snow again because I found out that Samuel Tarly was still with him. I was like, wow, Sam, you're still kicking. Sam, I like Sam. He's so realistic in the fact that he's like, I'm scared of everything, bro. This world sucks. Please get me out of here. And I'm like, yeah, me too, bro. So how to put this? Game of Thrones, the book series, I find that I like it because it is not afraid to hurt its main characters. At every turn, you don't know where the road will go next. When Robb was still King of the North, I thought, okay, then it's going to go down to a two kingdom showdown, and the Daenerys is going to come in and sweep them all. That was my expectation. But then Robb died at the Red Wedding. Caitlyn died at the Red Wedding. Arya, I thought she died at first because the writing was a little bit vague and it said she was hit in the back of the head with an axe, but it was actually the butt of an axe, not the sharp part. Um, I thought we had just lost like 3 Starks in the span of 3 chapters, and I was like, whoa. But it's set this stage. No one is immortal in Game of Thrones, and the show wasn't afraid to show this. I mean, people die, you know, but but without the books to go off of, the writers, the producers, and the directors were suddenly left with this boiling pot. They're like, oh, well, these guys are fan favorites. Let us just keep them alive since they're so favorited. Oh my gosh. Has a sillier mistake been made? John, Sam, Arya, I'm trying to think of who else. Um, a lot of armies. Jamie. What other sea was there? I can't remember. But basically, when the threat of the whites became too big to ignore and they're fighting them in hordes and it's awful. People are dying, people are getting swarmed by the dead, who are quite literally unstoppable unless you burn them. Somehow they just survive. You see people getting swarmed, dragged, pulled down, but still the same couple of characters are surviving. And suddenly it doesn't become a thing of chance. It does not become a thing of chance or luckiness like it did when Podrick Payne saved Tyrion's head from being chopped off by a knight. It suddenly becomes favoritism and false stakes. How am I supposed to care for this story anymore if I know deep down none of the characters I love are going to die? Then I'm just watching the show to watch stuff happen, which is like, okay, like yeah, it's called a show cuz you got to watch it, but like I want layers to pick apart. I love it when things are layered and intriguing and actually interesting to watch or listen to or read. So for this show to just put out false stakes, to put out opponents about moments that in the end have no effect, it's it's fodder. It's annoying. It feels like you're babying your audience to the point that nobody's going to want to watch the show anymore. So yeah. So yeah. Um moving on cuz I don't want to dwell any longer. Let's talk about forced romances. You remember I said how I hated when they were tying plot lines from just across chasms and gaps for the sake of having cool things, stuff you didn't expect. um let's talk about the romances. So arguably I don't know a lot about this stuff. um there are two relationships though that I do want to address. Let's start with the minor of the two that I have a little less opinions on because I just recently learned about it. My dad told me that apparently they were trying to do something between Arya and Gendry. How do I begin? So Arya's escape arc, where she was with Hot Pie and Gendry, was fun. They didn't know she was a girl until they had escaped and she really had to pee. And Gendry didn't show true interest in her until she was cleaned up and put in a dress at a castle, or what's it called? Fortress they were staying at with the band of people who had the Lightning Lords Knights. They weren't knights. You know what I mean, right? He was like, "Wow, Arya, you smell nice." Like that was it. And then he tried to make an advance on her. You know what that was? That was his little boy hormones going haywire because he's like, "Oh my gosh, a girl! Wow!" And Gendry, essentially, when Gendry left Arya for the Lightning Lord, that was the end of that. I like Arya unattached from quite literally everyone in her life. She is independent, her character functions independently, and that's just how she's meant to live. So when I find out that they were trying to put something between Arya and Genji, I was like, are you serious? Like, Gendry is still somewhere in the middle of the continent, and Arya is across the sea in Bravos. What were you trying to do? And also, what does that accomplish? Arya is still the daughter of a noble, and Gendry is a bastard-born blacksmith. Like, this pairing, it's not going to work. Even if they did truly love each other, what Arya's going to have to settle down and be a domestic, and I know that Arya does not want to be domestic. So it's just okay. Come on, guys. Like, give it up already. It's not going to work out. Like, actually. So moving on from that, we have what I. If you are in the shipping community, you know what I mean when I say crack ship. A crack ship is a crazy, bogus, weird Light Yagami slash Lightning McQueen type crazy. What were they thinking when they were making moves between Daenerys and Jon? Quite literally, like they were sea apart, like separated by water, and all of a sudden Jon is just abandoning the wall. He's going to another woman, but this time she's a queen, and he doesn't know what he wants, and he's suddenly so loyal to her. And I was just like, I I couldn't see the connection. Like, why? How do you look at two characters split up by time and space and days upon days upon days upon days of travel, and just be like, yeah, we gotta put them together? Oh my gosh! And then the fact that it was Jon who stabbed her, and I was just like, this isn't like the Romeo Juliet tragedy you're trying to make it to be, because I'm still mulling over the fact that, like, how did they get together? Also, that weird plot line of Jon also being part Targaryen, doesn't even help. Like, because what are you saying? Like, Daenerys was only attracted to him because she could smell the Targaryen in his blood. Like, are you serious? What does that have to do? You're like, wait, they need to still have incest in there somewhere. Like, are you serious? Leave. So I'm gonna move on from that before I get even more mad. Even more mad about the fact that Jon still didn't die. He killed a queen with several loyal companions, a big loyal dragon, and he didn't die. How? At this point, like, it's not even, it's not funny anymore. It's not mystical anymore. It's quite literally the most obvious plot armor I have ever seen. Ever. So let's move on. Gendry still being relevant. I don't know what they did with his character, but Gendry is not built to be someone long term. I had that feeling for a while. He's brooding, he's mysterious, and he's been upended from his previous life as a blacksmith's apprentice, right? He doesn't really know who his father is. He was fine. He was like, okay, I'm gonna be a blacksmith's apprentice. He probably had a whole life planned out, in the books at least. So tell me why there's apparently a scene where Gendry runs back to the wall through miles and miles of snow. A southerner, the son of Robert Baratheon, Baratheon? I don't know how to say it. Who he's from the south. He's never seen a drop of snow, a flake. Like, I get it. He's like a blacksmith. He's probably like strong. He's got that stamina, but it's in his arms. Like, why are you? What is he supposed? Oh my gosh, it made me so bad. I was like, just leave this dude behind because I don't know how you want to tie him into the story. Honestly, I wouldn't have mind if they made Gendry king because Tyrion could probably prove like, hey, my sister, yeah, all her kids are products of incest. I know that because I walked in on them one time. So make this guy who's actually a son of the late king. And I was like, oh, wow, that probably would work. But not Bran. Ooh, I'm getting mad. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the ages of characters since it's been itching at me. So back in medieval times, if you were like 16, you were considered a woman, and it's still kind of common to this day because that's like the peak of period time or however you put it. And in the books, it's not any different. A lot of the times some kid turns like 10 and they're like, "Wow, you're a man grown." And I'm like, "Are you serious? It's a 10-year-old boy. What are you talking about?" So imagine my surprise when suddenly I'm seeing John with a full beard. What? I'm seeing I'm seeing Rob with more beard than he should have. I'm seeing a lot of these people who are supposed to be like at best like 18 with the builds of 35-year-olds. If I'm missing something, like say like the ages were slightly different where they actually were young adults when the series began and they grew to be older adults, however you put it, then yeah, that's fine. But if I'm going from the basis of the book, like, um you guys are like 14, what are you doing out here? And it's not that they shouldn't be out there, it's just how they look. How do I put this? I don't like the fact that Jon Snow and Daenerys are basically around the same age. Daenerys is like just a couple years younger than Jon. My problem is that Daenerys looks like the age she should look like. She looks like a young woman, 17 at best, you know? Jon looks like he's 35. So seeing them together is super jarring. Jon is like a man when he's supposed to be like a really young Lord Commander, but I can't get it through my head that he's a young Lord Commander because he has a whole beard and super long hair. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It annoys me slightly. Like Joffrey, I mean, Joffrey kind of looked his age. He just looked a bit lanky. So I have nothing mad about that. But it's just like, okay, guys, please look your age. Like, the adult characters all look fine. They do look their age. They're grown, very grown. It's the children. I'm like, you guys couldn't, like, I don't know, use your CGI to age them down a little. At least try. Like come on. Moving on, we're going to talk about the Dragonstein. I'm sorry if I'm going a little out of order. There's some bullet points that I accidentally addressed while doing another bullet point, so it's weird. So there were a couple of the clips that I saw that had the dragons falling. And I was just like, oh, the dragons are dying. Um, there was one, I think the dragon's name Balerion. He was shot in the chest by Urine Greyjoy. Urine? I don't know how I say it. He was shot in the chest. And I'm currently reading Fire and Blood, the prehistory of Game of Thrones, and I'm very mad about that death. Dragons, at least in the world of Game of Thrones, their scales are like 100 layers of armor. So how did a bolt pierce under this dude's chest and kill him? Even if it did send, like, how did it send him careening into the ocean too? I'm being so serious. There's no reason that that bolt would stop him from flying. Because by the looks of it, I don't think his heart was even there. Maybe it would have been a little higher up. At worst, they like punctured a lung, which I guess is bad now that I think about it. But something about the fact that the blade could, not the blade, the harpoon, the spear, the metal pipe could plunge so deep in a dragon that's apparently has practically impervious scales made me so mad. It if it had like torn into his wing, like his arm, the wing part of his arm, and if and then that sent him into the ocean, I would have been like, okay, yeah, he's probably gonna drown because now he can't fly, and I don't think dragons can swim. But it hits him in the chest, rib cage area. Like, how did it do that? And they've killed a dragon before, but the dragon that died was, I think her name was Rhaenys. Yeah, Rhaena. And that dragon died because they didn't shoot at its scales because all its scales were impervious. They shot it through the eye and it died that way. That I can understand. That is a serious, like, that's real. So, how did the dragon die from a pipe blade spear to the chest? How? And then I was just like, oh my gosh. And then apparently one of the other dragons died because John decided to be like, wait, guys, I have to have a main character moment and fight off a couple whites that he literally could have outrun because they're basically shuffling zombies. You mean Daenerys? There's like, John, get on my dragon. We'll fly out of here. And John's like, girl, wait. I gotta fight these guys off. And she's just looking at him like, my dragon can breathe fire. Can you please get on my dragon? Oh my gosh. So yeah, the dragon's dying. It suddenly made me feel like, okay, you're going to undermine one of the most talked about, overpowered, strong things that just shook Westeros. Everyone knows you cannot contest with a dragon, and everyone knows that Daenerys has like three. Okay, she's already a scary figure. They're like, Daenerys has dragons. You have to take that into account. It's a huge threat. But you're telling me some ships on the sea can just shoot a big bow and arrow into the dragon's chest and the dragon will die? Are you serious? What? Oh my gosh. Anyway, let us move on to the White Knight. the villain who could control the whites. Cause I don't remember what his name was. I just remember the name Knight in it, and I low key put originally thought he's the Night, like as night as in the time of day, and I was just like, no, I don't think that's right. So now I put the White Knight, but I mean white as in the dead people. So bear with me. So he was this cool, strong, powerful foe, and he's meant to be this foil to John. He's meant to be his enemy. And John is he's not scary. How do I put this? If you were watching a zombie movie and suddenly the zombies are swarming your main characters and the main characters are getting dogpiled, you know they're dead, right? So why is that any different for Game of Thrones? You know they're dead. But somehow they just emerge, they're wiping blood off. I'm like, wow, guys, that was such a dirty battle. Oh, well, there's millions of whites. And it just immediately undermines whatever evilness the knight was putting forth. Because now I'm just like, this guy is just a blue guy who can control some zombies. It's not going to matter in the end because they're probably going to survive anyway, you know? So it's like, hello? What was why am I supposed to be scared of you? And that question, why am I supposed to be scared of you, especially comes forth when you realize that Arya when you realize that Arya just killed him with a knife. I think it was Valerian Steel, maybe. And I was just like, apparently the writers did it, or what are their names, David and Dan, they did it for shock value. They were like, well, yeah, it's John's enemy, but we need someone unexpected to come out of the blue and fight this guy. Like, no, you don't. Because when you have someone come out of the blue and fight this guy and defeat this guy, it doesn't make me scared of that guy anymore. It makes me scared of Arya. Suddenly she's just a powerhouse. Like, girl, bye. Leave. It wasn't a satisfying death because this, how do I put this? The White Knight, who I never saw any speaking scenes of, but every time he was there, he just stared menacingly, held in his hands, and started summoning dead people. And and then his death resulted from him not snapping a girl's neck immediately, which I doubt he would actually ever do if he was really a threat. He caught Arya with his hand, held her neck, and then he just stared at her. Like, are you serious? Are you serious? And so she does a cool move where she drops her knife into her other hand and then stabs it in between his armor, but it's like it's it's too slow. And it's not a satisfying death. It's really not. And I was like, are you serious? So this transitions me into my next and last bullet point, the dropped book plotlines. So I was made aware that the book and the show differed in a few big ways. And one of those big ways that I found out about was the fact that Littlefinger sold Sansa to the Boltons. Or well, gave her away like a gift. Which is funny when you think about it. But what's not funny is the fact that this isn't a little finger type move. He is calculating, he's cold, he twists things up. So giving away quite literally the next oldest blood relative of Ned Stark to the Boltons, with Ramsay and his craziness and Roose and his bloodletting, just giving her away as a gift, it doesn't propel him forward. If anything, it hinders him more because he doesn't have that chess piece anymore on the board for him to move around and use. Now that chess piece is put on the Bolton's board and they can do whatever they like with Sansa. If the Boltons were weren't as nice as they were in the show, they would have killed her. Basically, they could have killed her. Made sure the Stark line was no more. Followed up, become the new head honcho family of the North. So for Littlefinger to pull a move like that, it felt weird. And I was just like, okay, bro, like I could care less, and I also was was just mad. I was just like, are you serious? What is that going to do for you, you know? Um, and I and I'm connecting this to the White Knight through the fact that Catelyn Stark in the books is technically alive. Now, if you don't know, after the Red Wedding, Caitlyn killed one of Walder Frey's grandchildren, who was stupid, I guess, and his name is Aegon. She slit his throat when they killed Rob as a power move, when in reality, if you're looking at it, it was just like a silly move. And so in return, they killed Caitlyn. They tossed her into the river, and she floated for a while until she was found by the Lightning Lord. And the Lightning Lord basically just gave her the breath of life that had been keeping him alive for so long. So now Caitlyn is technically alive. She's calling herself Stoneheart and executing the people who have wronged her, which is a good chunk. Now, compare her to the White Knight, who's just there. He came out of the place beyond the wall. He's like, wow, I want to take over with my dead people, okay? And compare that motive to Caitlyn, who was killed by the Freys, brought back to life, and currently seeking revenge on a good chunk of people. Jaime, literally all the Lannisters, King's Landing, um, Brienne, I guess. She almost hung her in the book, but Brienne like saved herself or something. But yeah. So, and it's not only that, but Lady Caitlyn still has living connections. People whose reactions to her being somewhat alive will actually have an effect. If you want shock value, then just use that. Just use that. Like, are you serious? Um, so that when I found out that was dropped, I was just like, you're joking, because that is actually a gold mine. Have you ever, you know the trope that's come back wrong, right? Where someone who's died, who's been revived, isn't the person you knew. That is shock value. It's scary. And that fantastical element being in Game of Thrones was just, that was a diamond waiting to be mined. And they went and picked up some pebble. Are you serious? I was just like, okay, whatever. I at the end of the day, what's done is done. I'm technically 10 years late to this whole Game of Thrones hate train. So if you did make it this far in the video, thank you for watching. Once again, please like and subscribe and comment down below. Be like, hey, you actually got this wrong about the show. And if I did, sorry. I need to get my thing out in words. Um and if you agree with me, just say it, like, wow, you're actually kind of smart. Don't say it like that, actually. Okay. Goodbye.